Okay, John here, Hot Rods in the Woods once again. So we're gonna start figuring out our bracket for our manual steering rack. So I'm gonna show you a little bit of how you can do this without having a CAD program and a CNC machine and all the magic stuff on the planet. So what I'm starting with here is a piece of 1/4 inch plate. That's 1/4 inch cold rolled. I know it's a little ugly, but we can fix that. And basically what I've done in all my infinite wisdom is I set it over here like this, left about a 1/2 inch on the outside edge over here so it's hanging off a little bit. And then over here I marked it about a 1/2 inch past. So from there, we set that part aside. Let me go grab a speed square. If you don't have one of these, you can use a sheet of paper. Just anything you can make a straight square line with. You can take an old hunk of cardboard from a beer box and it'll work. Now we're just going to mark it. Get this back far enough so it's not interfering. Just a little more exact with a straight line. So then what we have to do is we have to determine where we want our steering shaft to come out. Now in this particular instance, I want it as close as possible to the frame rail. But I also have to remember that somehow or another this needs to be centered, right? Because this side tie rod is no longer than this side tie rod. I know this because I measured them. So we set this up here. We get it approximately where it needs to be. And we see that coming out of here, this is going to aim us right toward where it needs to be. So I can't really go any farther over. So with that done, and you can get a lot fancier if you want. This is just roughing it out. If you find center of your rack, you can do all of that. Make sure your rack is centered, but basically this part's going to remain the same. Where it becomes critical is these, are they centered in the frame? Are they off to the left or right? This particular unit centers in the frame. So I can measure from this frame rail, just about 2 3/4, and this frame rail, I'm just about 2 3/4 right where it sits. So if that's the case, then these will be centered. So I take my measurement across here. I find that it's 18.5, which means that my center mark is 9 1/4. And you can grab a tape measure and do that if you want to. You can calculate it with your phone calculator, or if you don't know how to do basic math, we already won. So we're going to mark that. That's C, center. Now, from this center line, I'm going to measure out past, just barely past, my spring perch. Now the reason for that is I'm going to be bolting my bracket for this underneath the leaf spring. It can't be a lot wider, and I will show you why. Because the spring has to work. So I can only go out maybe 1/8 of an inch past on each side. So I'll measure that. Sorry about my hand. And that is we'll make it 3 5/8. So 3 5/8. So we go to 3 1/2, which would be 1 3/4 plus a 1/16. So that would be 1 7/8. So we go to each side of our line. It's the easiest way to do this with the tape. So we'll go out 1 7/8 for the line. 1 7/8. For the line. Check our first one. We're good. Take our speed square once again. Now we can get a lot more accurate if we use a scribe instead of this soapstone. So here's our center. Now this will get 4, when I put the other piece on, it'll get 4 holes and actually direct bolt to these U-bolts so that it won't be able to move sideways, back and forth, nowhere. It won't go anywhere. So now we're back to our piece here. So we know we're going to have a tab sticking off. This is going to hang down. So we want our major strength in this piece right here. And then we're coming out here where we have a hole for this, a hole for this. So if we want to pretty this up a little bit, we can cut it like this. Once again, notice the concern with accuracy here. It gives you a rough idea how it's going to go. Now, when you do this, you want to radius edges. Make them round. Twofold, top and bottom. The reason for this isn't just for appearances. That one's ugly. But it's also, you don't want to be touching that with your hand. We do the same thing at the top. We just put a slight round in each one of those. And then if we want to get really tricky, we could put a hole in here just to take out a little bit of weight. But where we're really going to gain what we need to gain, we have to have some structural strength so it doesn't become a spring going forward and back, right? So for that, what we'll do is we'll put a gusset. Now our gusset has to be on the bottom. The reason it has to be on the bottom is this is the bottom, so it doesn't care where it is. If this is going to sit like this, it will be down here below the spring, so it's not going to interfere at all. So in order to do that, I'll just set this back here and I'll show you what we could do with that. I just happen to have another piece of that fine steel right here. There you go. Now this piece is going to be invisible because it's going to sit flat underneath, right? So it's really not that critical. But if we take this and we make it the same length, once again, this is all just preliminary. Now the reason I like to do this, there's a few reasons. Number one, now that I actually have something that I can physically see, it gives me an idea of A, is it going to work? And B, how is it going to look? So now we have that piece. What we'll do is we'll just take, this is just a plain old 1-inch ruler, set it along the bottom. And we'll draw some line. So we'll take this piece. I'll probably just go and buy that piece because I can buy 1 inch wide, 1/4 inch strapping, right? But then, if we are going to use this, what we do, what do I want to use? And remember, everything you have can be used for something other than its original design. I say that because if you haven't already robbed your wife's Tupperware or grabbed your old coffee cans, then you wouldn't understand. Now that's a little too big. Anyway, something with a hole, and we'll drill this. Now we can start from the middle, and we can drill a big hole, a little smaller, a little smaller, a little smaller, a little smaller, a little smaller. And do that all the way down. Because remember, this is adding structure to this. That is adding structure to this. So we can put some decorative holes in here, and they aren't going to take away from the integrity. Now, the only way I can explain it is, remember, that's going to be standing like this, attached to this. So we're making a piece of angle iron. It's hard to bend it this way, and virtually impossible to bend it this way. So you aren't going to be able to take this piece when it's welded to this piece and make it bow. It's just, it'll be really hard for that to happen. You don't want these too big. You still want some good metal on each side, but you can put a couple holes in it for decoration. You can lighten it up a little bit if you really need to, like we really need to. I can almost pick the front end of this up myself. I probably could if I didn't have a sore back. So we take this piece, we weld it to this piece. Now we have our structure. Now we can weld it on this side, which would be in the front, or we can weld it in the back, which truly makes it invisible because you won't see it from the front of the car. This piece, you will see a little bit. Now, because you're putting this brace in, you could actually put a couple holes in here too if you wanted to gain 1 bazillionth of a horsepower and save yourself 1/4 of a pound of weight. This isn't a race car. So this gives you the basic idea of how to make something fit that doesn't fit. So there it is. Now, the other part of this is, so if this sits like this behind the rack, then a piece of this will be hanging off the front like this, and will be bolted under here. So I hope that kind of makes a little bit of sense. I hope it gives you an idea of the process of how they come up with these little brackets and things that you just don't quite know how you're going to do. The reason I am doing this is because they make what they call a unisteer. That's a really fancy word for a rack that only has one side. So what they do is they hook this tie rod to this side, and then they run a tie rod link all the way across. So this basically becomes your pitman arm / steering link / drag link, and then a tie rod goes between the 2 wheels. That's fine and dandy. It's $500-600. If a manual steering rack, this is Mustang 2 stuff here. If it fits and works, why wouldn't you use it? And as you can see, picturing that this was underneath, remember, right here, there's actually a rub mark where it hit this spring because they had it bound into the axle in the front. This will be low enough, which puts it behind the axle, just above the axle, which means that with my radius arms below it, I can come right through here to my steering, and it's almost flat. The way to eliminate bump steer, death wobble, whatever you want to call it, is to have your tie rods straight to the wheels instead of having them down or up or down, which causes, as the wheel goes up and down, to lengthen and shorten. And as they lengthen and shorten, that wheel goes in and out. And once it starts to do that, it follows it's kind of like a gyroscope. It will keep doing the exact same wobble until you slow down and jam on the brakes. So there's the first steps of that. I can cut this two ways. I can cut it with my side grinder. I can cut it with my plasma cutter. If I cut it with my plasma cutter, I have to go back and grind it. If I cut it with my grinder, I only have to do it once, and then I can smooth it up. So basically, this is how this is gonna pan out. So that'll give you a great idea. I hope that helps. Once again, don't be scared. Please like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day, and we'll be back soon. Okay, I'm getting you in here a little closer so you can see what I've designed here. Now that's the start, and then of course we'll have this, which is our bottom piece. Now, one of the other things that we need to take into consideration, this is going to be hanging down underneath. Obviously it's behind the rack, the frame, so we're good there. But at the same time, with this standing up, and we've determined that we're going to put our flat gusset support across the back, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have some sort, well, if this is sitting just like this, our angle iron coming out like this, or angled plate, we should have a little bit of a gusset here. So the easiest way to do that is to just take a short piece. Doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be the entire length of our piece coming all the way up to here. It only has to be about like that, facing straight out, so that it would keep it from flexing front to back, right? So we just take a little piece of this and we just cut it like that. Well, you get the idea. And then we weld it onto this and onto that, or onto the piece that comes out flat here. So we get a little closer here. I'll probably make this up in the next couple days regardless. I have a good place to mock up a bunch of stuff right here. What I'd like to do, if at all possible, is go ahead and make that bracket, remove my leaf springs while it's right here in the lift, and just kind of set that in and see how it works. I may not do that. I might get it all cut up and welded together and then wait, because remember, I do have to turn the axle around, blah, 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 blah. So we'll see how all that pans out here in the next little bit. So I'll be back.